I'm Keith Hayes, and you'll be sick and tired of my face, but this pub goes back to 1742. There's a list of the landlords to prove it. Today, sitting on the high street, it's one of the 16 pubs in a town of 16,000. 150 years ago, there were 63 pubs in Lewes and 18 breweries. And in those days, there were only 9,000 people.
Wow, what a tall tale. Yes, but true. And over the next few programmes,
I'm going to take a closer look at some of the bloodier and more sensational events that have occurred on this seemingly normal high street. But right now, I'm just going to paint a general picture of this tiny English town, before I get to the bloody and the exotic. The high street is dominated by a Norman castle, one of the oldest Norman castles in the country. It was built not long after the invasion of 1066. It housed the Norman garrison, who ensured the people living inside its walls were kept safe. Indeed, Lewes was a walled town, and there is brick-by-brick evidence of the 4 gates that gave entry to the town.
By the way, Lewes isn't a corruption of Lou. It's the Saxon word for a hill. And if you thought that Lewes had lots of pubs, it has far more hilly roads. Far more even than the rest of the country, I think.
The modern-day Lewes is well used by its people. Lots of shops, markets, and even tea rooms. It also has a lot of parades. At the end of the school year, a ceremony takes place called patina. All year long, pupils design and build exotic costumes ready to parade down the high street.
Raphael, I walked onto the high street in Lewes a couple of years ago to be greeted with a lot of children running around in funny costumes. What on earth is that all about?
It's called Moving on Parade, and it's something we started 16 years ago. It started from a wish of parents to bring more art into schools because they see how much schools struggle demands of the government, and they wanted to support the school in that. So we started something called Patina, which is Parents and Teachers in the Arts.
Right.
Moving on Parade celebrates the transition for primary to secondary education of all the children in Lewes District Council.
Very colourful costumes. How do you decide what the costumes are? You're the artistic director, so you better give me a good answer on this.
So every year we have a theme, and the theme this year is Wonders of Our World. Last year we asked the community to suggest different artists that they would like to see on the parade, and loads of suggestions came in, and we shortlisted the huge list into 16 schools, which was the amount of schools that took part last year. We had Frida Kahlo, and we had Picasso, and we had Van Gogh, and we have Giacometti, and we had Andy Warhol. So they doing illustrations and designs, and then the patina artists take all the children's idea and adapt it into a practical design that the children are actually able to make in a couple of days. We invite about 8 or 10 people from every school to come and learn the skills of the carnival costume, and they start to make the big make that the school going to carry. And after that, the patina artists going into the school and work with the children on their individual costumes. We're trying to really do it as a enjoyment, getting people together. They're all gonna meet in their secondary school later on. we're trying to do we're trying that they'll meet each other beforehand as well. So we're doing events all year round for the benefit of the whole community, not just for the year sixes.
You do other things. You said you go to the schools. What do you do in the schools?
So our next event is on the 22nd of April. It's called Dance Your Socks Off. And because the theme this year is Wonders of Our World, we thought it'll be really fun to have an evening of teaching flamenco, bhangra, and the sirtaki with world food. We're going to have sushi, we're going to have international cocktails, we're going to have professional dance scholars who are going to teach the dance, and it's going to be a really fun event, and that's for children as well.
See, cocktails. I told you Lewis is a drinking town.
Yeah, we're
Right.
pretty good at cocktails. Growing every year. So we making contact with our twin towns. We're making contact with Lewis in America. There's a group of them, artists from Lewis in America, coming to Lewis in June. We made contact with them. And what we would really like is to use this format in other places, because Lewis is the only place that we know of who celebrates their moving on from primary to secondary schools, and it's people that hear about it, they are impressed, and it will be really nice for other people, other children in other communities to do the same.
Yeah, I did realise it was unique to Lewis and a very unusual operation. Well, how do the children react to it? I mean, generally speaking, do you get great support from the kids?
Yes, we do, and because it's been going for so many years, it becomes a part of the cultural calendar of the town. So young children know that when they get to year 6, they'll do the moving on parade, and all the siblings did it, and they've seen the rest of the older ones doing it. So it's kind of something that they look forward to.
I'm known for wearing strange costumes. As you can see, my hats are still there in this episode. So I don't think I should be marching, but I most certainly will come to the cocktails.
Great.
Raffaella, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
The adults have their turn, and on November the 5th, the biggest Guy Fawkes celebration anywhere in the world takes place. Exotic costumes, burning crosses, effigies stuffed with fireworks. Rousers, that is a banger to you and I, are tossed casually into the street. And almost every citizen of the town, old and young, takes part. There's a bit more to the bonfire celebration, though, than just the gunpowder plot. In 1553, Queen Mary was determined to bring Roman Catholicism back to England. Right here on the High Street, she burned 17 people at the stake who wouldn't convert. The dungeon, where they were held before being so horribly slaughtered, is still here, up these steps, being the last walk the condemned men would take. It was a horrible death. They were put into tar barrels, which were then set alight. Pretty bloody stuff. But we'll leave the High Street for a few minutes. Then we'll bring you more gore, blood and guts.
I think the government stinks. And I think the last government stank. And what's more, I think the government even before that stank. Whether I believe that or not is quite irrelevant. What is important is whether I can say it without being locked up by the King's men. It wasn't always so.
The rights enjoyed in a free democracy started right here. It was here, near to the High Street, that blood was shed in the name of freedom. It was match of the day, the King versus the Barons. King Henry III was roundly defeated at the Battle of Lewes, just on the edge of the town. Despite holding the castle, the king's men were put to the sword, and many were massacred in both the huge priory, which stood near the town, and right here in our bloody High Street. Panicking soldiers were easy pickings for the pursuing forces of Simon de Montfort. The Battle of Lewes is said to be the first step towards democracy in this country. That was in 1243.
When you say the Battle of Lewes to most people around this country now, they glance at you with vacant eyes. They don't know what it's about. What was it about?
Well, you're right. Most people here don't know about it. What happened was Simon de Montfort and his barons were arguing with the king and his men about representation in Parliament, whereas the king, the king just had all of his men and a lot of his French relatives in Parliament, and he was taxing the barons very heavily, and all of this money was going to the French relatives or going abroad, and the barons were not very happy about this. So they wanted at least half of the 24 men in Parliament to be elected barons. So, I mean, though it's not very democratic in the sense that we have it today, it's the start of that representation of a view that is not just the king's view on how things should be run. Simon de Montfort got to hear that the king was down at the Priory of St. Pancras. And why he was there was for the Feast of St. Pancras in the middle of May. And of course it was a big feast and people would come from all over the world, actually, all over Europe to the feast. So he needed somewhere as big as the Priory to be able to feed all these people and entertain them for a few days. And that's why he was here. Simon de Montfort was up country in northern Sussex in some of his estates with his men, and he heard that the king was down here and he sent messengers. He sent bishops of Winchester and London down with money, with £30,000, which is a fortune in those days, to try and negotiate a settlement with the king. The king was a little bit reticent to go into war with Simon de Montfort because, yes, they were brother-in-laws and he was an old man. They were in their late 50s at the time. Not that that's old now, but it was then. But the king's brother, Richard of Alamein, also called King of the Romans, etc., he wanted war. And, of course, Prince Edward, hothead, he definitely wanted war. So they settled, you know, the ransom money was sent back and the envoys, the bishops were sent back, and so it was war the next day. They negotiated the Mise of Lewes, most of which was, you know, yes, we took this castle, well, we give you it back and you give us this and we'll ransom this man and that man for this man and that kind of thing. But it also set down where the king would say, you know, 24 of the 24, we're going to have 12 elected barons, so that we're going to have the beginning of a parliamentary election. And Simon de Montfort made the king hand over his seals, which meant that the king had no power. So Simon de Montfort became the de facto king. It changed the king's complete and outright power. And Prince Edward then went on to, as king, ratify the clauses of the Magna Carta and the provisions of Oxford. And those began to change the king's power. And it also meant things like, if a woman died as a widow, her dowry money was hers. It didn't need to be given over to her husband's family and sons and what have you.
There's a start of women's rights as well.
There you go.
My goodness
There
me.
you go. The Normans did it for us.
The man who gave the name to the House of Commons, and according to at least one historian, named America the United States, preached his heretical views in the town's pubs. Here we go again, pubs in Lewes. You can't get away from them.
There's a tale handed down from Crown landlord to Crown landlord that Tom Paine was barred from drinking in that bar because he harassed and harangued the regulars to the point where they wouldn't drink anymore. They were fed up with Tom preaching the rights of man. So he walked across the street to the coaching inn, the White Hart,
where a more lenient landlord turned a blind eye, or, a more likely, a deaf ear to the ravings of this revolutionary.
It seemed that he used to like to spend his social hours here and his active political discussion times here in volatile discussion with a group which I I believe we thought was called the Headstrong Club because it still meets today, and they call it the Headstrong Club today. But I gather from a local historian that it was called White Hart Dining Club. Oh. And Thomas Paine, up in our sheriff's room, the oak-panelled function room, basically plotted the American Revolution and for a struggle for independence, which resulted in the final Declaration of Independence, an authenticated copy of which we have in the sheriff's room, and he was credited with originating that. And in turn, he dubbed the White Hart Hotel as the cradle of American independence.
He had some remarkable phrases, didn't he? I mean, according to Bill Bryson, he coined the first time the phrase the House of Commons, and also Bryson says that he coined the phrase the United States. So now the White Hart goes down in history as the cradle of independence. It's wonderful. But whoever the landlord was at the time embraced him and said, "Come on in, we love to hear you talk."
It certainly wasn't me. No, you're right. And yes, I think probably as any hotelier, always keen for a little bit of business, and it developed into quite an active dining club, I gather, because they had their volatile political discussions over dinner.
No record of you throwing him out of the hotel?
No, but I have to say that during the times that they have met here recently, we've had some very interesting volatile speakers, lots of celebrities, actors, and I remember Tony Benn's voice drilling through the sheriff's room door. It said, I ought not say too much, but it said that a lot of decisions are made here after the council chambers has closed. So that's interesting. Yeah, I think Lewis has embraced Thomas Paine very well. I'm very proud of him because he lived just up the road in the Bull Inn, and of course it was a very easy little trot, and even after he had imbibed, he wouldn't have far to go.
So our Tom, getting nowhere at home, he worked briefly as a customs officer in this house here, married the boss's daughter in the church here, within the town's walls, then took off to America.
In Lewis, he was ranting. In the colonies, he was making sense.
He preached revolution, and revolution was what he got. The American colonies broke away to form a new country, the United States. There are many more buildings that either face or back onto the high street. Lewes Prison is a few hundred yards up the road. It has held many famous people, including pop star Mick Jagger. Jagger famously talked his way to a prison phone, called the White Hart Hotel, and ordered a takeaway, which was duly delivered. Tucked away behind these buildings was a naval prison. 250 Russian prisoners captured in a naval battle in the Crimea War were incarcerated here in 1854. Life was harsh for the ratings, but the officers roamed the town at will, socializing with the locals and dining at the tables of the high and the mighty in Lewes. 17 of the ratings died while in prison, and a monument to them stands in the graveyard of a local church. This impressive structure was built by Tsar Alexander II, and its upkeep is still paid for by the Russian embassy in London. There are many other events that make the High Street interesting. The days of great circuses parading their animals. The Prince Regent winning a bet, driving a coach and four down the cobbled street. It's a wonder he didn't break his neck. So today I've taken a snapshot look at Lewes High Street. High Street UK. Every high street has a history. And there are thousands of high streets across the country. And this is just one of them. More high street tales tomorrow. Meanwhile, where's that pint?
Well, that is the first episode of our documentary about Lewis and some of the rather more unsavory things that have happened in the High Street, which I'm looking out on right this very minute, and which this very ancient hotel, which is, as you saw there, where the Headstrong Club met. Henry Kissinger is a member of the Headstrong Club, and so is Margaret Thatcher. It exists still today. It doesn't meet here any longer, but it still meets in Lewes. The Tom Paine Society, the Tom Paine, those people who are interested and feel that Tom Paine is, that he started everything here. And in fact, he did. I mean, historically, that's absolutely accurate. And he went off to the colonies, which he coined the United States, fomented a whole patch of trouble for the British government and the British monarchy. So the War of Independence was arguably started, thought up here in the well, I suppose in the rebels' household, the White Hart Hotel. This is where it all started. We'll be back with more episodes there are 8 episodes, giving you some idea of the background of this town. But also, it's not parochial. Much of what happened here in those days had far-reaching consequences, as not least of which is Tom Paine sitting down here. And look at those rafters. There's the very rafters that covered his head while he was doing it. He sat at this very bar. And he developed the rights of man, which said basically that man must have, or the ordinary man must have many more rights than he had in Tom Paine's time, which still had a huge element of the divine right of kings. Certainly a huge class system in which we had the average man had little to call his own. And Paine famously was said, I think when he was with Ben Franklin in London, driving past the Palace of Westminster, and said, there should be a chamber there where the ordinary man can be involved in his own destiny in this country. And it should be called a House of Commons. He's very prescient. Now, I am. It's 9:54. The headlines this morning in the papers are overwhelmingly about the huge earthquake that has taken place in Turkey and parts of Syria. That's not it. There's a lot of life, counting overnight 5,000, estimated to reach at a minimum of 10,000. That is the main headline story today. And that's the story that perhaps in other media you should keep an eye on. Because it is a disaster, a tragedy of enormous proportions. But I am actually going to leave you now at 9:55, coming up to 10 o'clock, because I have to go to Seaford, and it's to some extent shows that despite the fact that we bang the drum for the NHS, it's just how difficult sometimes things become. Because I have Parkinson's. I know that I've had Parkinson's since 2013. Whether I had it before then, I have no idea. We never know these things, do we? We put down aches and pains. Anyway, I have Parkinson's, and I'm going to have a specialist scan this morning to see whether the increasing difficulty that I have with walking is as a result of Parkinson's, in which case we probably can give some treatment, or if it is something totally unassociated, in which case they'll know that not to throw in any treatment into the basket that I have for looking after Parkinson's. And I just wanted to take a minute or two to say, look, this can be a devastating disease. I actually tell it to sod off, bugger off out of my life. It doesn't go, of course. But in doing so, that positive thought keeps me going, perhaps rather longer and in more shape, positive shape, than a lot of other people. There are a lot of very famous people who've had Parkinson's. Muhammad Ali was probably the most famous, closely followed by Michael J. Fox, who set up a foundation in the States to tackle it. But The Begin has had it. And so did Neil Diamond, Billy Graham. Lots of people with famous names, some of whom hid it for a number of years. But it comes home to you when, for instance, I had a note this morning from an old friend on the West Coast to tell me that her brother-in-law was now so bad with Parkinson's that he has gone into himself. Is in a living hell. He can barely move. Can't move his eyelids, can't move his face, can't talk. And yet he's still alive. The other day, I got word that a friend of mine who was responsible for first taking me onto the Eastern European sector to try and do something about journalists and journalism there, including, I may say, Lugansk, which is in Ukraine and where much of the activity is taking place in the present war. He also had to go into a nursing home. There's a wife of a friend of mine in Lewis here who's been devastated finding out that she's got Parkinson's. I always urge all these people to take a positive view. The fact of the matter is, we don't know if there is a cure. And if there is a cure, we haven't found it yet. And because there are so many other things that are fashionable in the motor neuron sector, for instance, Doddy Weir, a big fuss was made of him. But those of us who've got Parkinson's tend to think that we are sidelined. And not a great deal is done to try and find out, there are dedicated people, all right. There are dedicated people. But they're underfunded and undersupported. And like all things, I
was in touch with the Parkinson's Association that covers this part of the world. The lady in charge is absolute dynamo, works very hard. But of course, there are all the do-gooders who decide that they will get involved. There was one decision that affected me. It's taken them 3 months, and I still haven't gotten any decision from them. I've given up. However, I have not given up on my battle, my personal battle against Parkinson's. And this station has adopted it, whether they want it or not, has adopted Parkinson's as its charity of choice. Don't send money to me. Don't send money to us. We want you to send it directly to the people who are running the Parkinson's charity for this area, to the human dynamo, and let her distribute money as and when it goes. And I will, in the next couple of weeks, set up so that I can tell you where to send it. And I will continue to make an appeal. You're looking at somebody who is suffering badly from Parkinson's. I only tell you because I want support for this disease. I call it a condition now. It's a disease. Because it's killing too many people. They say that Parkinson's doesn't kill. Not true. It does. Okay. Sometimes it's through complications. But it needs attacking. And it needs attacking at grassroots level. And that's where I'm appealing to you. Over the next couple of weeks or so, we will give you instructions on where to send money or donations or whatever, however you think that you can help beat Parkinson's. And we can beat it. We can beat it. I'm determined not to let it get me. Not easy. You have to have broad shoulders. At the moment, I shuffle. And I said to a good friend the other day, you know, what really upsets me is I'm shuffling like an old man. And they looked me in the eyes and said, you are an old man. There's no sympathy whatsoever. But I'd like you to show sympathy to other people who suffer from Parkinson's. Not me, other people who suffer rather badly for one reason or another. And please, will you start supporting the Parkinson's organization through this station? We don't expect a great flood of money, but a few bob here and a few bob there, or occasionally, if you throw a wine and cheese party or something looking for a charity, think about Parkinson's. Think about Michael J. Fox. Think about Muhammad Ali. Think about the Big Yin. Think about Neil Diamond, Billy Graham. Think about all those people who suffered and fought their way through to try and keep going and use their talent. And then think, yeah, I could give them a few bob. Never mind the ordinary people like me and the people that I know personally, who have Parkinson's. It worries them rather more than it worries me, although I must say that at long last, it is beginning to take its toll on me. And actually, whereas I might have said in the past, oh, I'll take a slug of drink, one of the things that it does that really pisses me off is that my enjoyment of a glass of wine or a cocktail is tempered by the effects of Parkinson's. It takes away a little bit your desire, your taste buds goes, and primarily it's because the smell. Parkinson's affects your smell factor, which means that when you sniff the wine, you don't smell anything. Dear. But this is my appeal. as I shuffle off to the train now to go to Seaford, and where the good people there will try to see whether in fact I'm going downhill very fast with Parkinson's, or whether I've got something else. And what they can do is they can take a hammer and nail and perhaps get rid of my shuffle. Who knows? You have to take the rough with the smooth. I have no idea what they're going to say this morning. But yes, God bless the NHS, or at least God bless the people in it, because somebody somewhere is trying to do something. And this is the opportunity that I have to just make a little attempt to take this load off my shoulder and go back to shouting and yelling and screaming, ranting and raving, which I do so well. He says I do that well. It's not always logical. It's sometimes emotional. But the fact of the matter is, somebody somewhere has got to be a conscience for the dickheads that we've got who are running a lot of their institutions right now. And it doesn't matter at what level. And that is my self-imposed role, whether you like it or not. So, I'm off now. I want to say toodle pip. I want to say thank you for being with us. I have this big bugaboo at the moment about duty, which I see little, if any, in our leaders, and not a great deal in our society. And yet it's what made this country tick. It's what made it great. Yes, things were not fair. Yes, the level playing wasn't there. No, we weren't inclusive. And all the modern things that people get hot under the collar about. But we had a great sense of duty, and that's what we've lost. And what my efforts are is to try and stir you to getting back that sense of duty, because it is very key to my heart. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask yourself what you can do for your country. John F. Kennedy. Right? He's a good 80 years ago? No, I don't know. No, not quite that long. Yes, it was. 63. It's 40, 50, 60. It's almost 70 years ago, would you believe, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But Camelot, golden years of governance in the United States. And actually, not a bad few years of governance in this country. And the very heart of our constitutional monarchy, with the Queen as our head, and a Queen who was full, absolutely full of concern for her people and her community. She had support. She had concern. She had the feeling that we should all have. That we should worry about our country, worry about our society, worry about where we're taking this society and country of ours, and what we're doing to help it, not as most of us do now, is worry about self. duty. That's what we've got to try and regain. Duty. A sense of duty. And until we regain that, I don't believe that we're going to get out of this sloth, this absolute rubbish that we've got as our way of life right now. Got to get back to thinking duty. Okay? I've inserted this because I'm asking you to support every effort to try to discover or help the powers that be discover some cure or some assistance for Parkinson, which I think is the forgotten disease, the forgotten condition. And I can only speak this way passionately about it because I've got it. And I prefer not to have it, but I have. And I appreciate any assistance whatsoever to try and conquer it. Not a great deal. Not a great deal at all that can be done. What can be done needs your support. Anyway, I'm off now to Seaford, and I hope that perhaps they will take a look at my head and not lop it off, but perhaps I, by putting myself under the microscope, can make my little contribution. Until tomorrow, toodle, toodle pip, and let us not in all this, in my plea for duty, in my plea for Parkinson's, let us not forget the horrific numbers, possibly up to 10,000 people, who've lost their lives because of a natural disaster in Turkey and Syria. Earthquake. Toodles.